The sun had barely risen on the quiet human colony when the soldier received an unexpected message. He had been stationed on this planet for months, guarding the remote base, far from the action of the galactic wars. His days were filled with routine, patrols, maintenance, and the occasional communication with Earth. But today was different. Today, everything would change. The message was encrypted, but the seal on it was unmistakable, an official request from the Galactic Council. With a deep breath, the soldier opened it. To Lieutenant Gregory Darnell, Human Forces, the message began. We, the Galactic Council, request that you honor a unique and significant agreement for the continued peace of our galaxy. An alliance is to be forged through marriage. An alien princess, a representative of the Tirana Empire, is to marry you, a representative of humanity. This union will help secure the future of both civilizations. Your immediate cooperation is required. The soldier's eyes widened in disbelief. A marriage. He scrolled through the message again. But the words didn't change. It was an official order. He was to marry an alien princess. He sat back in his chair, staring at the screen. What did this mean for him? What did it mean for humanity? Was this truly the way the galaxy worked now? Before he could answer his own questions, the door to his quarters opened with a soft hiss. He jumped, not expecting anyone to enter without notice. Standing in the doorway was a figure, tall and regal, with striking features unlike anything he had seen before. She was an alien, of course, but there was something different about her, something that commanded respect. Her skin was a deep shade of blue, and her eyes shone like stars. She wore a simple but elegant robe of shimmering silver, and her posture was one of nobility, but also weariness. The soldier stood up quickly, instinctively saluting, though he had no idea who this woman was. I am Princess Lyra of the Tirana Empire, she said, her voice calm and steady, though there was a trace of uncertainty beneath it. I've been sent here by my mother to fulfill our agreement. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of the situation. This was the princess. She was the one he was supposed to marry. Your mother, the soldier asked, still trying to wrap his head around it. But why me? Because the Galactic Council believes that this marriage will strengthen the alliance between our two worlds. My mother's wishes are clear. The union between us will ensure peace. The soldier didn't know what to say. He had heard of the Tirana Empire, of course, but he never expected to be part of its politics, especially not like this. I'm just a soldier, he said slowly. I don't have anything to offer you. Princess Lyra took a step forward, her gaze soft but firm. Neither do I. I am here because it is what is expected of me. This marriage isn't my choice, but duty demands that I fulfill it. Her words echoed in the soldier's mind. Duty. He understood that. He had been serving humanity for years because it was his duty. But now, it seemed like duty was pushing him into something far bigger than he could have ever imagined. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling around them. This was not a simple mission. This was not a simple alliance. This was the start of something new, something neither of them had planned for. And yet, despite the uncertainty, there was something about the princess, something in her eyes, that made the soldier wonder if there might be more to this than just politics. But for now, all he could do was follow orders. He nodded. All right, I'll cooperate. And so, the first step toward an uncertain future began. The days that followed were filled with strange conversations and awkward silences. Princess Lyra stayed at the base, and the soldier, Gregory Darnell, found himself spending more time with her than he ever expected. Despite the overwhelming circumstances, there was a certain calmness about her. But that didn't make things any easier. At first, they'd met in the officers' lounge, a neutral space for the two of them to talk. The soldier tried to keep things professional, but it was clear that both of them were uncomfortable. He was a soldier, used to combat, strategy, and orders. She, on the other hand, was royalty, born into a life of power and politics. Where I come from, Things are different, Lyra said one morning, her voice soft but firm. She sat across from him, her long, dark hair cascading over her shoulder as she adjusted the silver robe that marked her status. We do not make decisions for ourselves. Our roles are chosen long before we are born. Gregory nodded, trying to understand. He had always fought for freedom, for the choice to decide his own future. To hear someone so powerful say she had no control over her life felt strange to him. That must be hard, he said, unsure of how to respond. Lyra looked at him, her alien eyes filled with something he couldn't quite place, sadness, perhaps, or regret. It is. I have never known a life where I could choose my own path. Everything is decided by my family, by tradition. It is the way of my people. Where I come from, Gregory began, leaning forward. We value freedom above all else. I chose to be a soldier. I chose to fight for my people. I made that decision myself. Lyra's eyes flickered with interest. You chose. But what if that choice led you to danger, or even death? He smiled, a little bitterly. It's the risk we take, but it's still our choice. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their worlds pressing down on them. Lyra couldn't fully understand Gregory's perspective. To her, duty was everything. But she could see something in his eyes, something that made him different from anyone she had ever met. Maybe it was that fire in him, that spark of independence. As the days passed, they continued to clash over their different views. Gregory struggled to understand the rigid structure of Lyra's world, where emotions were often suppressed in favor of duty and tradition. Lyra, in turn, couldn't quite grasp the way humans valued freedom, even when it meant taking risks. One afternoon, while they were walking through the colony, Lyra pointed to a nearby building. That's where my people's council gathers, she explained. It is where all decisions are made. Everything is discussed, debated, and decided for the good of the Empire. Gregory glanced at the imposing structure, its alien architecture striking and beautiful, yet cold. And you have no say in it. Lyra paused. I do, but only in matters that affect my people. My personal life is not one of them. Gregory frowned. That doesn't sound fair. It's not, Lyra agreed quietly, her eyes fixed on the building. But it is the way of my world. Their cultural differences were vast, and it seemed like they would never fully understand each other. Yet, as they spent more time together, Gregory couldn't help but notice that Lyra was changing. She was becoming more open, more willing to share her thoughts, and for the first time, he began to see her not just as a princess or a duty-bound figure, but as a person who longed for freedom, just like he did. The more they talked, the more their worlds seemed to collide. And yet, in those moments, a connection was slowly forming between them, one that neither of them fully understood yet. As the days went by, Gregory couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this arrangement than he had been told. The princess, Lyra, seemed kind, but there was something behind her eyes, something she wasn't telling him. The more they spent time together, the more Gregory became certain that this wasn't just about an alliance between their two people. There was a deeper reason, and it wasn't long before he decided to look for answers. One evening, while Lyra was in her quarters, Gregory sneaked into the communication room. He had access to most of the base's systems, and it wasn't difficult to find information about the princess's family. What he discovered shocked him. The Chirana Empire, though powerful, was in turmoil. Internal power struggles were simmering beneath the surface. Princess Lyra's mother, Queen Aelora, had been facing opposition from factions within her own empire. Gregory's eyes widened as he read the reports. It seemed that the queen, desperate to strengthen her position, had chosen the human alliance as a way to gain leverage. If Lyra married him, it would not only cement the peace, but also provide the queen with an ally within humanity, something she desperately needed. Gregory's heart sank. He had been nothing more than a pawn in a much larger game. He spent the next few days wrestling with this new information. He wasn't sure how to confront Lyra about it. She had already made it clear that she wasn't entirely happy with the arrangement. But now, knowing that her mother had used her as a political tool, it only made the situation more complicated. The next morning, he found Lyra in the courtyard of the base, staring out at the horizon. The sky was a deep shade of red, a reminder of the planet's violent atmosphere. It was beautiful, but it also felt cold and unforgiving, much like their situation. "Lyra," Gregory said, his voice quieter than usual. "We need to talk." She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "About what?" "I know about your mother," Gregory said, his words carefully chosen. "I know why she sent you here." Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment, she said nothing. Then softly, she spoke. "I should have known you would find out. It's true. My mother has her own reasons for sending me here. She's playing a dangerous game, using our marriage to gain power. But I didn't have a choice in the matter." Gregory looked at her, trying to understand. "But you could have refused. You're the princess. You have some say in this." "I don't," Lyra replied, her voice bitter. "In my world, we don't choose our paths. Our duty is everything. And my duty is to my people, even if it means sacrificing my happiness." Gregory stepped closer, his heart heavy. "So you've been forced into this?" Lyra looked away, her eyes filled with sadness. "Yes. But it doesn't matter. I've accepted it. This is my life now." Gregory couldn't help but feel sorry for her. She had been trapped in a situation she didn't choose, just as he had. But unlike him, she couldn't walk away from it. Her family, her people, her entire future were at the mercy of the politics around her. He reached out, gently placing a hand on her arm. "You don't have to accept this, Lyra. You have a choice. You don't have to marry me just because your mother says so." Lyra met his gaze, her eyes searching his face. For the first time, he saw a flicker of hope in them, as though she had been waiting for someone to say those words to her. "I wish I could believe that," she whispered. "But the truth is, I'm trapped. If I refuse, the consequences will be far worse. My mother will never forgive me." Gregory took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He didn't know what the right answer was, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't let her feel this way, trapped by the choices of others. "Maybe," he said slowly, "we can figure out a way out of this, together." For the first time, Lyra's face softened, a small but genuine smile tugging at her lips. "Maybe," she murmured. As they stood there, in the quiet of the courtyard, they both realized that the path ahead wouldn't be easy. But for the first time, they were both willing to fight for a future that was theirs to decide. The tension between the human colony and the Chirana Empire had been growing for weeks. Gregory had done his best to focus on his duties, but the weight of the princess's situation lingered in his mind. Every time he saw Lyra, he couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming, something neither of them could escape. One morning, as the sun rose over the colony, that something arrived. The warning came in a burst of static over the communication system. Gregory was in the command center when the message flashed across the screen. "Hostile ships detected in orbit. Unknown alien force." It didn't take long for the alarm to sound, and within minutes, the entire base was on high alert. Gregory's heart raced. He had been through this kind of thing before. Alien invasions, space skirmishes, political tensions turning into full-blown war. But this felt different. This wasn't just a random attack. This was personal. He quickly gathered his gear and headed toward the command center, where Lyra was waiting. The princess stood by a large holoscreen, her face tense but determined. "They're here," she said, her voice sharp. "The factions within my empire. They know about my forced marriage to a human soldier. They don't approve of it. They want to end this alliance before it even begins." Gregory stared at the map in front of them. The alien ships were closing in fast. A few were unmistakably from the Chirana Empire, but others were unrecognized, rogue groups within the empire who had rejected the Queen's rule. We can't just sit here and wait, Gregory said, his mind already racing. We need to act. Lyra nodded, her gaze never leaving the screen. I know. My people, my mother's enemies, are powerful, but they won't take me easily. I will fight. Gregory turned to her, his expression firm. I'm not letting you face this alone. He moved quickly to the weapon systems, connecting to the defense satellites in orbit. Lyra watched him, clearly surprised by his readiness to jump into action. She had expected him to follow orders, but not this. Not this willingness to risk everything. We'll need more than just defense systems, Gregory said, glancing back at her. We need to be prepared for an assault on the ground. Your enemies will try to land troops, I'm sure of it. I have my own forces, Lyra replied, her voice steady. But they will be of no help if I cannot give them a command. Gregory quickly realized what she meant. The princess had her own elite guards, but without her orders, they couldn't act. This wasn't just a battle for the colony, it was a battle for her survival. Then let's make sure you're in control, Gregory said. I'll lead the defense here. You focus on getting your troops into position. Lyra hesitated, then nodded. It was the first time she truly looked at him with a glimmer of trust in her eyes. They were on the same side now, bound by something more than politics. Gregory moved quickly, organizing the base's defenses, while Lyra tapped into her own communication network. It was clear they were a team now, even if their partnership had started out as something neither of them had wanted. Hours later, the battle began. The colony's defenses, though strong, were tested like never before. Alien ships hovered overhead, unleashing laser fire that shook the ground. On the surface, Gregory led a group of soldiers to hold the line, while Lyra commanded her forces from the safety of the command center. Though their worlds were different, their goals were the same. They had to survive. They had to protect the colony. And for the first time, they were truly fighting together, not because it was their duty, but because they wanted to. As the enemy forces pressed forward, Gregory and Lyra stood side by side, an unlikely pair brought together by circumstance and fate. They had no idea what the future held, but one thing was clear. In this moment, they were more than just allies. They were partners, and they would fight for each other, no matter the cost. The battle raged on, but Gregory and Lyra knew this was just the beginning. Their enemies had underestimated them, but they would soon learn that humans and Tirana royalty could make the most dangerous of allies. The battle outside the colony raged on for hours, the ground shaking with every blast from the alien ships above. But inside the command center, Gregory and Lyra stood side by side, focused on the task at hand. The soldiers under Gregory's command fought valiantly, holding back the enemy at every turn. Lyra's guards, once hesitant, now moved with precision, following her orders without question. The princess had taken control, and her presence in the command center gave everyone a sense of purpose. Despite the chaos around them, Gregory couldn't help but notice how different things had become between them. In the beginning, he had seen her only as a political figure, someone he was forced to work with for the sake of an alliance. But now, after hours of coordinating the defense together, he saw her as more than just a princess. She was strong, resourceful, and capable. They had worked together to keep the colony safe, and through it, their connection had deepened in ways neither of them had expected. "You're good at this," Gregory said, his voice barely above a whisper as they watched the battle unfold on the holographic screen. "I didn't think you'd be this focused." Lyra gave him a quick glance, her expression softening slightly. "I've had no choice but to learn. My life has never been about personal desires. It's always been about duty, and now my people's future depends on my ability to lead." Gregory nodded, understanding more than she realized. "I get that. I've fought for my people, too. I guess in the end, that's what we have in common." For a moment, they stood in silence, watching the enemy forces slowly retreat. The tide of the battle had turned in their favor, but neither of them felt the usual rush of victory. Instead, there was an overwhelming sense of relief. They had survived. Together. As the last of the enemy ships fled, Lyra's voice broke the silence. "We did it." Gregory looked at her, surprised by the way her eyes glinted with something more than just triumph. It was gratitude. And something else. Something deeper. The bond between them had shifted, from two people simply doing their duty to something much more complex. Something that neither of them had planned. "We did," he agreed, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But it's not over yet. We still have a lot to figure out." Lyra met his gaze, her expression serious. "Yes, but for the first time, I believe we can figure it out together." Her words hung in the air between them, the weight of their meaning settling over both of them. It was a simple statement, but it carried more than just the promise of partnership. It carried the possibility of something more. Gregory didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward Lyra. "You know," he said quietly, "I never expected any of this. You, the battle, the marriage. But I'm glad it's you." Lyra smiled softly, her eyes warm for the first time in days. "I didn't expect it either. But in some strange way, I'm glad it's you too." It was a small step, but it was a step towards something neither of them had anticipated. The bond between them had started as a duty, a forced alliance for the good of their people. But now it was becoming something more personal, something that couldn't be easily defined by politics or duty. As the final reports of the battle came in, Lyra turned back to the screens, but this time her gaze lingered on Gregory for a moment longer than necessary. He didn't look away, his thoughts as conflicted as hers. The battle was over, but their journey was far from finished. What had started as an unexpected partnership was now beginning to feel like something deeper. And as Gregory and Lyra stood together, both knew that whatever the future held, they would face it as allies, and perhaps in time, as something more. The days after the battle were quieter, but the tension between Gregory and Lyra hadn't fully dissipated. The victory had brought them closer, yes, but there were still too many unanswered questions. The dust had settled, but the truth about their situation remained as complicated as ever. Gregory couldn't shake the feeling that Lyra was hiding something. She had always been open with him in battle and in the face of danger, but when it came to certain details about her family and her role in the Tirana Empire, she kept things vague. It was as though she was protecting herself, or perhaps protecting him from something he wasn't ready to understand. One evening, after the sun had set and the colony was calm, Gregory decided it was time to get some answers. He found Lyra in the main hall of the command center, standing near a large window that overlooked the planet's vast desert landscape. The soft light of the stars reflected off her skin, giving her an almost ethereal glow. "Lyra," Gregory said as he approached, his voice gentle but firm, "we need to talk." She turned to face him, her expression guarded. "About what?" "About you. About your family. You've been holding back, and I think it's time I understood why." For a moment, there was silence. Lyra looked at him, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. She seemed to hesitate, as if weighing her options. But then, with a deep sigh, she spoke. "You're right," she said quietly. "There's something I've been keeping from you, something I should have told you earlier." Gregory's heart rate quickened. He had known there was more to her story than she was letting on, but hearing her admit it felt like a small victory. At least now, she was being honest with him. "My mother," Lyra began, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "has always been a powerful figure in our empire. She's made many enemies over the years, factions within the Tirana court that don't agree with her leadership. They believe she's too weak, too diplomatic, too willing to compromise with the rest of the galaxy." Gregory nodded, already piecing things together. "So, you're part of her plan to keep control." Lyra's eyes dropped to the floor. "Yes, my marriage to you was never just about an alliance between humanity and the Tirana Empire. It was about securing power for my mother. She knew that if I married a human soldier, someone from the outside, It would send a strong message to her enemies. It would make the other factions hesitate. It was a way for her to maintain control over her throne. Gregory felt a wave of understanding wash over him. The marriage had never been about him or Lyra. It had been about politics. But the realization stung. He had been used, and Lyra, in her own way, had been forced into this position just as much as he had. But I didn't choose this, Lyra continued, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't choose to be used as a pawn in a political game. I didn't ask for this life. I wanted to find my own path, but my mother, she's always had other plans for me. Plans I couldn't escape. Gregory's heart softened. He had known, deep down, that she wasn't in this by choice. The way she carried herself, the way she spoke about her duty, it all made sense now. She had been trapped by the weight of her family's expectations, just as he had been trapped by the duty he felt toward his people. He took a step closer, his voice low but sincere. Lyra, you don't have to keep carrying this alone. You don't have to follow your mother's path if it's not what you want. Lyra looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. But I don't know if I can stop it. My mother won't let me go so easily. There are consequences, Gregory. If I refuse her, I risk everything. My family, my position, even my life. Gregory reached out, gently taking her hand. Then we'll face it together. We don't have to follow anyone else's rules. We make our own choices from now on. For a moment, Lyra just stood there, looking at him as if weighing his words. Slowly, a small, uncertain smile appeared on her face. Maybe we can. In that moment, they both realized something important. The weight of their responsibilities, their family obligations, and the politics of their worlds no longer control them. Together, they could choose a different path, one that was theirs alone. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be obstacles, dangers, and sacrifices. But for the first time, Lyra and Gregory felt that they had the power to face them, side by side. And that was a choice they could finally make together. The following days were filled with uncertainty. Gregory and Lyra knew they couldn't keep running forever. They had defied the expectations of their respective worlds by choosing to fight together, but the consequences were closing in. Lyra's mother, Queen Aelora, had already sent a message demanding her return. If Lyra stayed on this path, there would be no turning back. Her mother would consider it a betrayal, and the entire Tirana Empire would likely fall into chaos. Gregory could sense the fear in Lyra's eyes every time she looked at him. She was torn between loyalty to her people and the desire to follow her heart. He knew what that felt like, being caught between two worlds, two duties, and he couldn't bear the thought of seeing her crushed under the weight of it all. One evening, they sat together in the command center, going over their plans for the future. The atmosphere was tense. It was clear that the decision they had to make would change everything. I can't go back to her, Lyra said quietly, staring at the map of their colony. I can't go back to my mother. She won't forgive me for this. Gregory's voice was steady. You don't have to. We don't have to go back. We can make our own future. She looked at him, her eyes filled with doubt. But how? My mother controls the Empire. If I refuse her, everything I've ever known could fall apart. I could lose my title, my people, everything. Gregory moved closer to her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. I know it's hard, but we don't have to face this alone. We have options. I'll stand with you, whatever you decide. Lyra turned her gaze toward him, her expression softening. For the first time in days, a faint spark of hope flickered in her eyes. You mean it? He nodded. I'll fight with you, Lyra. We'll find a way to stand against your mother. We'll build a new future for both of us. It won't be easy, but we can do it together. She studied his face, searching for any sign of doubt. There was none. Gregory's resolve was unwavering. For the first time, Lyra felt a sense of peace settle in her chest. Maybe it was possible. Maybe they could change everything. I've spent my whole life doing what was expected of me, Lyra said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've followed the rules, done what my mother told me. But I don't want to anymore. I want to make my own choices. I want to choose my own path. And I want you to be part of it." Gregory smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. "You don't have to do this alone. We'll figure it out. Together." The next morning, they prepared for what would come next. It was clear that the forces aligned against them would not stop until they had brought Lyra back to the Chirana Empire. But now, Lyra and Gregory were no longer just soldiers or royalty. They were partners, ready to face the unknown together. As they looked out across the vast desert landscape from the command center's window, Gregory and Lyra knew that their future would not be easy. There would be battles ahead, both on the ground and in their hearts. But for the first time, they weren't running from their responsibilities. They were taking control of their destiny. "We'll make our stand here," Lyra said, her voice steady with newfound determination. "We'll fight for what we believe in. And we won't let anyone take that away from us." Gregory nodded, his hand still on her shoulder. "We won't." And with that, they turned toward the future, ready to face whatever came their way. Together. The tension in the air was thick, the kind that weighed heavily on the chest and made each breath feel like a struggle. Gregory and Lyra had made their decision. There was no turning back now. The Queen's forces were gathering, preparing to bring Lyra home, and they knew that time was running out. But as the days passed, the weight of their choice grew heavier. What they were about to do would change everything, and neither of them was fully prepared for the consequences. Lyra had always known what was expected of her. Her entire life had been dictated by duty and tradition. But now she was stepping into uncharted territory, and for the first time, she felt truly free and terrified. "We can't keep running," Gregory said one evening, as they sat together in the command center, the soft glow of the screens casting a pale light over their faces. "They'll catch up with us sooner or later." Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with determination, but also fear. "I know, but I can't go back to her. I can't live that life anymore." Gregory nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He knew she was scared, but he also knew she was strong. They had both chosen this path together, and now they had to see it through. "We have to face her," Gregory continued, his voice steady. "We'll make our stand, right here. We fight for our future, for the choice we've made. And if we win, we can finally live the life we want." Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. She had always lived in the shadow of her mother's power, always playing the role that had been assigned to her. But now, with Gregory by her side, she felt like she could stand tall for the first time in her life. They didn't have to obey anyone else's rules. They could make their own. But even as she felt this newfound strength, doubt crept in. What if they didn't win? What if their stand wasn't enough to stop the empire from falling apart? What if she lost everything? The crown, her people, her future. "I'm not sure I'm strong enough for this," Lyra confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if it all goes wrong? What if I lose everything I've ever known?" Gregory reached across the table, his hand gently resting on hers. "We'll face it together. We may not know what happens next, but we have each other. That's enough." For a moment, the weight of the situation seemed to fade. In that simple touch, Lyra felt the reassurance she needed. No matter what happened, she wouldn't be alone. And for the first time, she didn't have to follow anyone else's path. As the days passed, they prepared. Lyra contacted her most trusted allies within the empire, those who had supported her in secret, those who believed in her vision for a new future. They were ready to fight for her, to stand by her side against the Queen's forces. Gregory, too, rallied the soldiers who had sworn loyalty to him, preparing them for the coming battle. It wasn't just about winning. It was about making a statement. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity and the Chirana princess could stand together, regardless of the politics that had torn their worlds apart. Then the day came. The first wave of enemy ships appeared on the horizon, their dark forms blocking out the stars. Gregory stood tall, his heart racing as he looked at Lyra one last time. "You ready?" he asked, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. Lyra nodded, her grip tight on the control panel. "Let's do this." The battle was about to begin. It was a fight for their future, a fight for the freedom to choose their own destiny. And no matter how dangerous it was, they were ready to face it. Together. The roar of the approaching enemy ships echoed through the command center as Lyra and Gregory stood side by side, preparing for the fight of their lives. The weight of the decision they had made hung heavily over them, but neither of them hesitated. There was no going back now. The forces that were about to storm their position weren't just enemies. They were the remnants of Lyra's own empire, led by those who refused to accept the change she and Gregory represented. Lyra felt a coldness in her chest as she watched the ships come closer, but there was also a fire inside her. This wasn't just a battle for the colony. It was a battle for her future, her freedom, and the chance to choose her own path. She had never wanted to be a pawn in her mother's game. Now, for the first time, she felt like she was finally taking control of her own destiny. Gregory, standing beside her, was calm, though his thoughts raced. He had been in countless battles before, but this one was different. He wasn't just fighting for his people, he was fighting for Lyra, and that made everything feel more personal. "Ready?" Gregory asked, his voice steady, but with a hint of urgency. Lyra glanced at him, her eyes firm. "Let's end this." The first wave of enemy ships arrived, blocking out the stars as they descended on the colony. Gregory quickly relayed orders to his soldiers, organizing them for the defense of the base. Lyra, meanwhile, communicated with her loyalists within the Chirana Empire, directing them to strike when the time was right. As the enemy forces landed on the planet's surface, the first wave of fighting began. Gregory led his troops with precision, while Lyra's guards moved in tandem with the soldiers, their alien technology providing a distinct advantage. The battlefield was chaotic, filled with blasts of energy, shouts of commands, and the hum of weapons firing in all directions. But in the midst of the violence, Lyra could see something she hadn't expected. Her people were fighting for her, not against her. The soldiers loyal to her mother had once been her enemies, but now they fought side by side with the humans and the Chirana loyalists. The unity between them was undeniable. It was as though they had all come to a realization that this war, this battle for control, wasn't about the past. It was about the future. As the fighting raged on, Gregory fought with a strength fueled by something he hadn't anticipated: hope. Hope that they could win, not just in the battle, but in the larger fight for the kind of future they wanted. A future where they were in control of their own destinies, free from the chains of politics and tradition. After hours of intense fighting, the enemy forces began to falter. The battle was far from over, but it was clear they had gained the upper hand. Lyra's forces were pushing back, and the soldiers who had once opposed her were now retreating. Gregory watched as the remaining enemy ships began to pull back, signaling a temporary retreat. His chest heaved with exhaustion, but there was a sense of victory in the air. They had held their ground. They had made their stand. Lyra stood beside him, watching the enemy retreat with a look of quiet determination. She wasn't celebrating. Not yet. There was still much to be done. But for the first time, she felt a sense of freedom she had never known. This battle wasn't just about survival. It was about making a statement. "We did it," Gregory said, his voice weary but proud. Lyra nodded, her eyes focused on the horizon. "This is just the beginning. We've shown them that we're not backing down." Gregory smiled. "And we won't." The battle was over for now, but the fight for their future had only just begun. Together, they had proven that no matter how great the odds, they could stand united. They had made their choice, and they were ready to face whatever came next, as allies and as something more. The galaxy had underestimated them, but now they would know that humans and Chirana royalty could change the course of history together. The sun rose slowly over the battlefield, casting its warm light over the wreckage left behind from the night's fierce fighting. The air was thick with the smell of smoke, but there was something else in the atmosphere, something fresh, something that felt like a new beginning. Lyra stood on the balcony of the command center, looking out at the aftermath. The enemy forces had retreated, their ships scattering into the vastness of space. The battle was over, but the war for their future wasn't finished. Yet, for the first time, Lyra felt hope. Hope that she could truly shape her destiny. Beside her, Gregory stood quietly, his eyes scanning the horizon, but his mind was elsewhere. It had been a long, hard fight, and they had won, but there was more to do. Lyra was no longer just the princess who had been trapped by her duty. She was the leader of a new movement, a movement that would change the future of the Tirana Empire. "We did it," Gregory said, breaking the silence. His voice was soft, but filled with pride. Lyra nodded slowly. "We've taken the first step, but this is just the beginning, Gregory. We've made a statement. Now we need to make sure the message sticks." Gregory turned to face her, meeting her eyes with a determined gaze. "You've already done that. By standing here, by not backing down, you've shown everyone that you're more than just a princess. You're a leader." Lyra smiled faintly, but there was still a trace of uncertainty in her eyes. "I'm not sure I'm ready for this. My mother's enemies are still out there. They'll never forgive me for what I've done. I don't know if I can handle the pressure of leading an entire empire." Gregory stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone. We've already proven that we can face anything together. And together, we'll figure out how to lead." Lyra looked at him, a spark of gratitude lighting up her expression. The journey they had taken had been difficult, and the road ahead wouldn't be any easier. But in that moment, she realized something important. She wasn't alone. For the first time in her life, she had someone by her side who believed in her. Not because of her title, not because of her status, but because of who she was. "We'll need to build alliances," Lyra said, her voice steady now. "The empire is divided, but I think we have a chance to bring it together. We can change things, but it's going to take time. A lot of time." Gregory nodded. "And I'll be with you every step of the way." Together, they turned away from the balcony and walked back into the command center. The soldiers were already gathering, tending to their wounds, repairing their ships, and organizing supplies. The air was thick with the weight of their victory, but also with the realization that the hard work was just beginning. Lyra met the eyes of her people, the soldiers, the guards, the allies who had fought with her. They had put their trust in her, and now it was her responsibility to lead them to a new future. A future where she was no longer just a pawn in her mother's game. A future where the Tirana Empire could stand as an equal among the other civilizations, where freedom and choice were no longer just dreams, but reality. And standing beside her, Gregory was more than just a soldier. He was her partner, someone who would fight with her, not for a cause, but for the life they both wanted to build. Together, they would change the course of history. As the day grew brighter, Lyra took a deep breath, looking forward to the challenge ahead. There would be struggles, there would be sacrifices. For the first time in her life, she felt ready to face it all. With Gregory by her side, she knew they could build the future they had dreamed of. And so, they stepped forward, together, into a new beginning. A future where they made their own choices. A future that was theirs.